Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to a very special episode on 4GQ TV's MCU After Show. And today we have two very special guests. Real quick, co-host Paris is over there right next to me. But we have very special guests today. First off, I want to welcome Darick Robertson back. Thank you very much for coming on. And Gary Whitta for the first time. Hopefully I said your last name correctly.
Yes, most people pronounce it correctly. They just can't spell it correctly.
Nice.
You know that feeling.
Well, thank you both for coming on today. And both of you are working on something very exciting to many fans out there that do, that are into comics. Can you tell us what you guys are working on?
Who's that directed to?
Either one.
Us.
Okay.
Do a combo.
So Darick and I are collaborating. We've worked together before on various different projects, but this is probably the biggest thing that we've done together. Batman Fortress is a 8-part original miniseries from DC Comics that just came out this past week. Issue 1 is out now, and it'll run on a monthly basis for the next 8 months. So we'll probably wrap up sometime around the holidays or early next year. And it's an original Batman story that Darick and I were excited about. Darick's obviously done a lot of work in the DC universe before, a lot of work. And I had kind of dabbled a little bit. I contributed a story to the Joker 80th anniversary compendium that that DC put out for the Joker's 80th. I think that was last year. And DC obviously loved Darick, and they liked the story, the Joker story I did. And so Ben Abernathy, our editor at DC, had the idea of putting us together on a Batman book. And they asked us to pitch them some ideas, and they liked what we pitched. And now here we are.
Here we are.
Awesome.
Nice.
So this is directed at both of you as well, but maybe Darick, go first. What's it like working together on a comic book?
It's great. Well, with Gary, it's always fun. I mean, this, like I said, it's not our first rodeo collaborating. We worked on a book for Image called Oliver, which was an original idea that Gary had. It's had stops and starts, but I'm very passionate about the work I put into it. But it's fun because with Gary, he's a friend, so I can call him up and we talk on the phone and hammer things out, and it's very collaborative.
Yeah, it's been good. It's always nice to work on something with your friends. And Darick and I were friends before we were collaborators. We used to be drinking buddies back. We would get drunk and watch Star Wars movies together before we ever really thought seriously about working together. But when I needed an artist for Oliver, which was an original idea I wanted to do as a comic book, we teamed up on that. And like I said, we did that at Image. So when Ben had the idea of pairing us up on a Batman book, it was a very easy sell because we'd worked together before. Darick can probably speak to this more than I can because he's worked with many more writers than I have with artists on comic book projects. But I imagine it's different with everyone. Every writer has a different way of working. Every artist has a different way of working. But Darick and I know how we work together. And Darick's often very accommodating. I'll often give him scripts that are not the easiest thing in the world to figure out how to break it into panels and make work as a comic book page, but he'll always find a way to do it. And so he's actually been. I mean, I've done several comics, but I'm more fluent as a screenwriter and working in other medias. And comic books obviously is a very there's a very specific language to it, the way that things work on the page. And like I said, I'm not a newbie anymore. I've been doing this for a while, but Darick is immensely more experienced than I am. So anytime I'm not 100% sure about like how something might work on a page or how best to kind of take the idea that I have and express it visually, Darick's always anytime I'm stuck for an idea, he'll come in and solve the problem for me. So it's a good working relationship. He carries me a lot, basically.
That's very kind. Gary gives me a lot of good shit to work with, and so hey, can I swear on this? Is this a swearing kind of thing? So I threw out the S-bomb. Like I should ask before I.
We're PG-13.
PG-13,
Yeah.
I'll try to avoid F-bombs if I can. I don't hear them until they come out of me sometimes. No, but Gary gives me great stuff to work with, and I've had, and his screenwriting chops really come through, and because he essentially writes a movie, and he did it with Oliver. Oliver was supposed to be a movie originally, and so our first collaboration was me basically taking his screenplay and adapting it into comics, and like finding page breaks and chapter breaks, and we move some stuff around because it works better in a sequential comic, like with this scene here rather than that scene there. Because you're not watching it in a linear fashion like you do with cinema. You're actually reading it in chunks, and so sometimes you want that pacing to be, a dramatic beginning and a middle and then an end, because it's that chapter is just going to encapsulate what might have been 20 minutes of film, and 20 minutes of film might flow very differently. So excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so that might happen a few times.
No worries.
That seamlessness of working together has been really good for me, because while Gary says I'm carrying him, I actually feel like Gary's freeing me up to be my most creative self. I'm happiest when I have a lot of room to play. One of the nicest compliments I got working in my long career was from Keith Giffen. And Keith Giffen notoriously would break, and in my very first jobs, like I would get these breakdowns, and this is apparently how he worked with everybody. He would do these pencil breakdowns for every page that you were supposed to follow as the artist. So when I worked on Justice League, I was working off of Keith's layouts, and he's a brilliant storyteller. He's considered one of the best. And so we ended up doing 2 issues of The Authority that he wrote by himself. He didn't collaborate with like he did with J.M. DeMatteis back then. It was just him writing The Authority. And the first script I got said, normally I'd lay this all out, but Darick knows what he's doing. So it was like a really nice pat on the back from Keith Giffen, like saying, I don't need to, Darick doesn't need the training wheels. And I was like, oh, felt like an achievement. I don't get, people don't show up and give me awards or anything like that in this business. Yeah. Like a lot of times you just work, and, so it's the little compliments I get from co-creators and people that I admire that I kind of lock away in my imaginary awards cabinet.
Nice.
So, yeah, when Darick and I first started working together on Oliver, right, because I was coming to that relatively inexperienced as a comic book writer at that time. I didn't even break the scripts down into panels. I said Darick was essentially getting what looked a lot like screenplay pages from me, which was just, kind of, scene direction and dialogue, but it wasn't like panel 1, panel 2, or even page 1, page 2, because I just felt like, Darick has done so many more comics than I have, that I trusted his instinct on and his experience in how to kind of break things down into panels and how to kind of, get the best possible kind of page flow and panel flow way better than I did my own instinct. And he was happy to kind of take the contiguous pages that I gave him and figure out how to kind of break them down into panels. At the same time, I felt kind of guilty that like that is part of my job as a writer. If you look at like most comic book scripts, they do, kind of break things down into, they do the panel flow. As I felt kind of guilty that I was offloading all that onto Darick. So kind of like I've been kind of learning as I go, and now on Fortress, the pages that Darick gets me, they are in panels, but it's still very kind of like if there's anything specific I want to draw attention to, say, oh, this should be like a full page splash, or let's go big on this panel or whatever, or like this should be on a page turn, to preserve the reveal or whatever, then I'll include those notes. But for the main part, even when Darick gets broken down panel pages from me, he also knows that he has like a free hand to basically throw that away and say, Gary's got 4 pages on this panel, but I think it'll work better if I do 5 here and have more space on the next page or whatever. Like the panel flows that I do are really just kind of to make sure that everything's going to fit. And I'm not, if I'm writing a 20-page issue, I'm not giving Darick, 25 pages worth of material that's not going to fit. So when I do my own pages and panels, I know it's all basically going to fit, but the panels that I give him are very kind of like, this is a placeholder. Feel free to kind of chop this up and change it around as you see fit. So it's worked out pretty well so far, I think.
No, it's one that's great, and that's the way a lot of comic book writers that I've collaborated with, the better ones, the more experienced ones, that's kind of how they do it too. Like, this is just a suggestion. Like, I see 6 panels, but if you want to do more or less, I'm open to that. And I try to always show it to the writer before I go to inks to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And so if they have feedback on the pencils, they can give me notes that early stage to where laying it out again or adding or subtracting something isn't as big of a pain in the ass as it is if it's inked. But nice. But in issue 1, like I think there was an example where we haven't read it, so now I feel like I'm going to be spoiling it if I bring it. There's a sequence with somebody hanging off a bus, and they're losing their grip, and it was the way it was written, and the way I chose to lay it out is I did 4 panels of just the hand slipping off the grip, and that was something that I contributed and showed to Gary, and he's like, "Oh, I love that." So that's like, okay, he might not have thought to put 4 panels there, but there were 4 smart panels that really give you the, hopefully that really give the feeling of like, the grip getting lost.
Yeah.
It's an Eisner technique that I love, and I try to apply wherever possible. But that's the kind of thing where, but I showed it to Gary, like, what do you think of this? And, if Gary likes it and Ben likes it, when we talk about Ben, we're talking about the great Ben Abernathy, who's our editor on this. Okay. But I always figure, like, I have 2 people I got to make happy besides myself, and that's the writer and the editor. If they're happy with the work and I feel good about it, I'm kind of done at that point.
Nice. Yeah, since we're diving into Fortress episode 1, by the way, it just was released on May 24th. You can get it at all your comic stores online. I thought I seen Kindle, DC Online, all the other places. I think it's $3.99 US. So yeah, people go out and make sure you go pick up this comic. It's really, really done really well. So as we dive into this, I know you don't want to spoil it for the fans and things like that, but what are some of your most memorable moments, I guess, between you and Darick, you and Gary, of creating? We'll just start with episode 1, the first book number 1.
Well, it's been fun for me because it's something that Gary and I had, we talked about doing this story years ago. Gary didn't remember this, but I was over at his house and we were watching Superman 3 or Superman 2.
We weren't watching Superman 3, I promise you. We were watching,
it was
Superman 2.
I think we were bagging on Superman 3. That's what it was. We were watching 2 and shitting on 3 because
that's probably what it was.
Yeah, and then
listen, hold on. Let's just put a pin in it for a second. Superman 3 has got some cool stuff in it. It's not all bad.
Right.
It is a bad movie overall.
It's pretty bad,
but it does have some cool bits in it, I think.
Drunk Superman.
To be fair to it, you have to kind of pick them out and watch them just like on their own.
Drunk Superman and the fight between Drunk Superman and Clark to get his soul back.
I know. Yeah, they're like the
that
bad
10 minutes is the best part.
Okay. Yeah, because what is it like?
Christopher Reeve totally sold it.
There's one part of Krypton that they can't figure out what it is, so he just puts tar in there, and so you get the kind of the tar version of evil Superman. I always thought that was really fun. I always remember him flicking the peanuts into the mirror.
Yes, that's my favorite part.
Breaking the bottles. Yeah.
When we started talking about the Fortress of Solitude, and we were talking about how Superman seemed to have all these different powers when he was there. And I had at the time I had been asked by DC, my Legends of the Dark Knight story that I wrote and drew early last year. It came from a pitch for what they were calling at the time DC Digital Heroes or something like that. And they had asked me for a number of pitches. And so my Batman pitch became my Legends of the Dark Knight story. I expanded on it, but I wanted to work on one with Gary because we were in the middle of doing Oliver at the time. And so I said, hey, do you want to pitch one of these together? And we started talking about. And I started talking about this idea I had about Batman climbing outside the Fortress of Solitude, trying to break in. And it led to this huge conversation that we had about breaking into the Fortress of Solitude. And so when we came back around on our pitches, that came up again. And Gary was what Gary's taken it and done with it is far beyond what I had imagined. But it was a really cool, but all the way back to then, we wanted to collaborate on DC stuff together. So this was our first real opportunity to kind of run whole hog and and what's been really fun is Gary's kind of in a toy box going, I want to play with this guy and that guy and bring this guy in. And and for me, it's I'm just happy to draw. So,
Yeah, that idea of treating the Fortress of, I've always loved the idea of the Fortress of Solitude. It's one of my favorite pieces of iconography from the Superman universe, and it's been rendered so beautifully in different comics and movies over the years. I love the idea of, for me, it's a really, really important part of Superman's character, because he's so alien, that I feel like it's that place. He doesn't really belong on Earth. I think he knows that, and so sometimes he kind of needs that place. It's kind of like his home away from home, right? So it's almost this little piece of Krypton that is that's all that's left of his homeworld, and he goes there to kind of reflect and be by himself and just kind of think about his unique situation. I've always kind of liked that idea, and we all need that place, right? We all need our own kind of personal fortress of solitude where we can just go, and I guess it's the toilet for most of us these days, for those of us who are married with kids. But it's also fascinating to think of it as this, this piece of Kryptonian architecture that has Kryptonian level technology inside of it, and that's one of the things I always thought was interesting about Krypton. Kind of thousands of years more technologically advanced than Earth. And so what is that, what kind of fun can you have with that? And so the idea of trying to break into it and almost constructing almost like an Ocean's 11 style heist, where it's like, well, what are the particular, it's kind of like breaking into Fort Knox and figuring out, okay, well, here's what defensive systems they have in place. Here's how we're going to circumvent the security. We're going to do that. We're going to need this kind of specialist, that we need an explosives guy. We need like a hacker, we're going to need these con man, the classic kind of putting together a crew to kind of, pull off a heist. I always thought there was something. I mean, I love heist movies. I love those kind of movies. The Ocean's movies are so much fun. That the idea of kind of taking that model and applying it to what in this comic book is basically kind of represented as the most secure, well guarded, most impossible to break into facility, not just on Earth, but in anywhere in the universe. Because again, what does it look like when you're trying to break into a place that is protected by security, that is the product of a civilization of technology that's thousands of years more advanced than our own? Well, that could be a really interesting challenge for a bunch of superheroes to try and figure out. And so that was the idea that had been percolating for a while. And when Ben asked us to pitch him an idea, that was kind of we got to do the fortress. And so that's kind of where it came from.
All the further my brain had gone into it was just picturing Batman clinging to the outside of the fortress by his fingertips in sleeting snow, and polar bears around the bottom if he fell, and trying to find an opening somehow. That's as far as my brain had gone into it. And it was almost make more of a good cover image or something than it would be a story. So like the whole Ocean's 11 element that Gary brought to it, I was like, see, this is why I don't want to do it by myself. That's why I like working with Gary, because it's like it's so much bigger and better than what I would have thought of by myself.
So it's also a nice
I was
way
only
to
thinking of a 10-page story too, because it was those digital stories were supposed to be short and tight. But
right. But when you have 8 issues to play with, it's also a really nice opportunity to kind of start pulling out all the really interesting action figures. That's often how I think about my job. When I was 10 years old, I was like kind of bashing my action figures together, kind of making them fight and coming up with little stories. And we're still doing that today, except now we get paid to do it, right? But that's essentially what we're still doing. It's kind of, bashing action figures together and kind of creating little narratives, context for them to, why are they fighting? And we're just doing that now on a grander scale. But so when this came along, the idea of doing Batman can't do this alone, right? And so he's going to need a crew of specialists to do that. That seemed like it made a lot of sense just from a practical storytelling standpoint, but it also means you get to have a lot of fun. It's like, okay, and we break into the Fortress of Solitude, because again, I feel like it's too obvious, it's too easy to have all the A-list guys doing it. And as much as I love, kind of Wonder Woman and the Flash and the big kind of A-list guys, I kind of wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper into the roster and like look at the C list and D list. And I pulled a copy of like kind of the kind of the DC character roster, like everyone that's ever appeared in a DC comic, no matter how obscure. And as you know, that list goes.
We both started with a copy of this.
That's it. The ultimate character guys is one of the books I was referring to, and there's a bunch of characters in there that I'd never heard of, but I thought were fascinating. We ended up doing some research, and the conceit that we came up with is in the initial attempts to kind of defeat this alien ship that's causing all of these problems on Earth. Most of the Justice League essentially get either wiped out or captured or somehow injured, or they're not available for what comes next. So when Bruce figures out that his only hope is to somehow break into the fortress and get something from inside of there that they need, and he has to start thinking, well, who would help me? Like all the people that you would think of first are no longer available. And so he's got to start thinking, well, who's farther down the list? And he's like, it's the C list and the D list. It's the ragtag group of guys that's far from who you'd want to have on that mission, but it's who he can get. And so you kind of got to make the best of it, and that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, it's better that way too, because otherwise the book should be called Justice League.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's basically what you.
And we're trying to make it, and that's also why issue 1 is so centered in Gotham. Is Gary wisely wanted to like start out and tell a straightforward Batman story as a seed plant, and because by issue 2 it goes completely out the window. they're
Right.
totally out of Gotham. It gets crazy from there.
Well,
Yeah,
I
one
mean,
of
the
the
world's
things
in
I think-
chaos, right?
I was going to say one of the things I think we can actually talk. I was going to say we can't really talk about too much stuff that's going in the future, but one of the things I think
Yeah.
DC has already kind of revealed, because they showed the cover and there's a synopsis for issue 3 already out there, is that one of the people that Bruce has to approach and team up with, because he needs his help, needs his resources, needs his what he can bring to the table, is Lex Luthor. And you think, well, like the idea of like Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor working together just seems like this is how desperate they are, right? They really don't need. They obviously can't stand each other. They would be enemies in any other context, but in this one very, very specific set of circumstances where the entire Earth is in peril and there's no power of communications, the whole Earth has basically been kind of thrown back to the Dark Ages, and like he desperately needs. He realizes he can't do it alone. This is the version of Lex Luthor where he's president of the United States, because I've always loved that version of Lex. I've always thought that version is hilarious. And so he has access to all these kind of military resources and intelligence and things like that no one else would have. Plus, everything that Lex Luthor brings to the party by himself, kind of genius level intelligence and very specific knowledge of Superman and Kryptonian technology, because he's been studying it all his life, right? Made a lot. It's a very kind of uneasy. I think almost like every other page, Batman is saying something like, if you screw me on this, like it's constantly worried that Luthor is going to screw him. He's just waiting for his moment to double cross him.
Right. No, this story is epic, just based on the like you're talking about, the toy box, the sandbox that you have to play with after you move on to the next iterations of the story. That hopefully, I don't know the cadence of the release dates, but I know the first one just dropped. So hopefully we get part 2 comes up.
Yeah, we're
soon.
on a monthly schedule now for the next 8 months.
Okay, awesome. So in June,
Which is why I'm in my studio on Memorial Day and not out having fun.
You're not at Gary's, watching Superman 3.
No, we'll save that to celebrate afterwards. That's
Yes.
the interesting thing about a monthly book like this, is that it's all happening in various. It's not unlike a TV series, where as the pilot is airing, they're writing episode 12 and shooting episode 6, and various different parts of the TV season are in different parts of production. So like where we are right now, issue 1's on the shelves. I'm currently writing issue 8. I'm writing the final episode, the final issue right now. And what are you drawing right now, Darick? You're on
I'm wrapping up the last few pages from number 4.
From number 4, and about to start on 5. So the book, at any given time, the book, there's like various different stages of the book that are in development. Like again, like 2 and 3 are basically issues. 2 and 3 are locked pretty much. I think we're just waiting for lettering on 3. Darick's finishing up the art on 4. I think we have covers through 5.
I sent you links right before we got on here.
Yeah. Scripts are done through 7, and I'm working on 8 right now. And so
nice.
It's a weird thing to have people reacting to issue 1, even as it's still like the rest of the series is still very much in production.
Yeah, my brain is totally into like a different part of it. So when people are reacting to the art number 1, it feels like so long ago.
Yeah.
Right.
The nice thing about it is that we're far enough along that like you can't. It's not like, let's say that we hadn't written anything else yet. We just put issue 1 out. Like I would never want to be in the position where I'm looking at what people are saying about issue 1 and like lead to us like second guessing what we do. Oh, people didn't like this. Should we change it? Or people really like that. Should we do more of that? I like that. I like the idea that we just kind of like just the 2 of us and Ben, as well as our editor, just kind of like committed. So this is the story that we're telling. And so like I say, I'm writing 8 right now, but the story is basically done, right? We know what
complete,
all the major things that happen are. And so, it's kind of like, you burn your ships, when you arrive in the new world. So there's no going back. And we are doing some, again, I don't know. I say to Darick all the time, every time he sends me a page or something from like a particular moment, I'm like, man, people are going to hate us. I can't believe we're doing this or whatever. Or people are going to love us for this or hate us for this, because, we kill off some characters and we reinvent the way that because it's not a continuity book. It's, it's 8 issues that sit outside of the main continuity. We can do things that are different. Like in the main continuity of Batman right now, Alfred's dead, but he's alive in our book, right? Because it's a separate story.
And
but it also means that we can
president.
we can kill Luthor is president. We can kill characters if we want. We can introduce new characters. We can like reinvent. We can retcon characters because it's its own thing. Like it's not going to affect the ongoing continuity of the story. So we have a lot more of a free hand to do wacky things if we want and kind of get like I said, look at these characters from from a way. If you were kind of bound by ongoing continuity, you might not have as much of the freedom that we have with this book.
Right.
Once upon a time, they would have called this an Elseworld story.
Yeah, that's right. By the end of it, certainly, yeah. Because again, we do. I think one of the DC blurbs they put out was like, this book will change the way you think about Superman forever. And yeah, certainly by the time that we're done, there's some interesting revelations about a lot of different characters in the DC universe. But again, it's its own thing. If you don't like what we've done, you can always just go back to the main DC books. But again, that's part of the beauty.
We're not changing continuity.
Right. But I mean, that's part of the beauty of
we're exploring
of
an idea.
Yeah, well, that's as you were saying, Gary. That's the beauty of comics. Like people, if we had the same continuity, it's just sort of be like, okay, let's just continue doing the same thing. You might as well call this a Justice League book, and then there you go, right? But if you can build something outside of that, which you've done, it gives people. For me, it's exciting because you get to get something that's fresh. Hey, guess what? Such and such passed away because of what happened here, and they didn't have backup. And Justice League is all over the place right now, right? Those sort of stories relate.
It often is very restricting, right? Especially when you work in Star Wars or you work in one of these big universes like DC or Marvel, like so much of the guardrails are already in place, right? We know that historically, canonically, this is the case, and you can't change this or that. And sometimes that's fun to kind of work with those restrictions, but other times, like, oh man, I wish I could do this. And there's no like inherently creative reason why I can't do it. It's just because like something already happened in another book that kind of closes that door or whatever. Right. So to be able to work, like I said, outside of the main continuity, and obviously, we're not going to, completely, turn everything on. It's still recognizably, Batman, and the characters you recognize it very much as a book that takes place in the DC universe, but we have more latitude to kind of play with the characters and have fun with some of the origins, like the different origin stories for characters, and just the way that they interact with each other. We can just have a little bit more fun with it. And any time like I do find myself accidentally kind of straying over the guardrail, there's like Ben's or Darick's always there to say, I can't do that, you went too far this time, and they'll set me back on the correct path.
Yeah, I kind of came into this with a little bit of a I don't know what the word would be, prejudice, I guess, because I had just spent some time writing Batman, so I used it in my head, and I had to go through a bunch of turning Batman stuff into an editor that would come back and go, I don't know about this, or what do you think about that? So I had to kind of get re-educated on like who Batman is now, but something that both Gary and Ben and I agreed with, and that Gary kind of we laughed about, was that like Batman is never funny. Batman has to be the straight man in every scene, and so everybody around him can make a joke, but Batman should never make a joke.
Right. Yeah, that was actually one of the first notes I got back from Ben, was I had Batman kind of. I wanted some of the comments we got on the book. Actually, I don't know if how much of it you've read in terms of the reviews that have been coming in, but it's interesting. A lot of people really like it, but they're basically saying, "Oh, Batman's like a bit more casual in the way that he talks to people. He's not. He's usually very, very stern and stoic in the way that he interacts with people. He's a bit more open and kind of. He has like talks to Alfred a lot and talks to Gordon. The people that the people that are in his life, and he's a bit more conversational than you might be used to, because that's just how I wanted to write him, and I kind of felt like that's how he would talk. And it's interesting when you work on a book like this, you do end up like falling down really nerdy rabbit holes. Like Darick and I ended up a big debate about like what kind of music Bruce listens to when he's working in the Batcave. He's like, well, Bruce would only listen to like really grim dark, like raw kind of like very kind of death metal kind of music because he's so dark and he's in a soul. And I'm like, really? I kind of like, he can't be that one-dimensional. Like even Bruce Wayne, even Batman, right, who has dedicated his life to this singular mission of fighting crime, like that can't be all he does. Like he's got like, what's on his iPod? Like he must listen to something. Like he must have music that he likes. He must have books that he likes. He must have like a favorite TV show. Like I know that he's a workaholic, and like, but he must have just for his own sanity, must have a little bit of downtime. And I just kind of felt like having him.
But you're bringing sanity into this, and it's really debatable.
Well, yes, and obviously we could talk all day about
the guy that's got a singular focus that dresses up as a bat and goes out is
in question. But I just kind of feel like I just wanted to humanize him a little bit. And even if it just, I don't even remember if we even put anything like this in the book, but even if it's just like, there's a couple of pop culture references in there.
I really like the way I think Gary's Bruce Wayne, he writes a great Bruce Wayne. And so the interactions between Alfred and Bruce Wayne, when Bruce is relaxed and in a safe space like the Batcave and just talking to Alfred, who knows him like a father, it's like that Bruce Wayne, that makes sense to me for that guy to be a little bit more relaxed or jovial or whatever. And we threw on in the pencils, I put a Smith's t-shirt on Bruce Wayne while I was working in the thing, and the editor was immediately like, "Yeah, we keep that Smith's t-shirt."
You can't always do everything you want to do. It's like, surely I feel like Bruce would at least listen to like the Smiths or something.
So he can't have an t-shirt on him.
But then there's issues where you can't clear that with legal.
Ben was right on it because I said, "Well, we'll try. We'll see if it'll,
But there was a
but I can't promise we're going to get to do this."
Like I remember the very first note I got back from Ben was like, it's in issue 1. They're talking about like Batman's satellites that he has in orbit, because of course he has satellites. And in the original script that I wrote, there was just like a 1-panel joke where Bruce says, "I really think we should have called them Battleites." And Alfred's like, "No, we're not going to do that." And that was just like a quick joke that we had. And the note that I got back from Ben was like, Batman wouldn't make that joke. Like, he's too serious. And I was like, okay, well, we'll give it to, let's have Alfred be the funny one. And Alfred's the one who says, "Oh, they should be Battleites." And then Batman's like, "No." And so I'll always find a way to get a joke in there. But yeah, one of the things that I learned was that you have a very, very limited scope to have Bruce or Batman ever be funny, because he is defined by all this darkness, and he's so serious in his approach, and so that was, and once I realized that, and it kind of almost takes me back to like the old, it's actually kind of a classic thing in comedy, like usually the person at the center of the piece is the serious one and the joke's always on them. Like I used to listen to the old Jack Benny show on the radio, which was hilarious, but like Jack Benny never actually made a joke himself. It was always the people around him that were making jokes kind of at his expense. And I kind of thought of it in that there's a scene in issue 2 where the Justice League are sitting around the table in the Hall of Justice, and there's a lot of like funny stuff that's being said, but like none of it is said by Batman. He's the one saying like, "Knock it off with the jokes," because I'm Batman and I take things very seriously. And so I found a way to get a lot of comedy into the book, but making sure that in terms of like how Bruce kind of interacts with comedy or any kind of levity, I still feel like there's more latitude for that than a lot of people would typically think. And every now and again, Bruce, there's like something a little bit funny in there, but for the most part, yeah, he's the very grimdark, serious Bruce that we know from the comics.
Right.
If you need any commentary from me for the past 4 minutes of whatever Gary was saying, I have none because my earpods just stopped. So I was trying to put up a red flag that I couldn't hear anything. So.
Oh, okay. I was just slagging you off. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about.
Well,
no, he said that you love Superman 3 really after the conversation.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why. Superman 4 as well. How much Darick loves that movie, I'll never understand.
Oh God, yeah. That is
the quest for peace.
That's why we have in issue 4 a big debut and revival of Nuclear Man.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing is it all ends up being Nuclear Man. I'm like, Derek, no one gives a shit about Nuclear Man, but
I'm telling you,
this movie's underrated, dude. Nuclear Man. We're gonna give him a fair shot this time.
Are you breaking that news right now? We're gonna get
flying Lacey Lane out into space where she can breathe like she's in an atmosphere. It's perfectly fine.
Any kneel before Zod moments. That was a really classic scene in the Superman movies.
Now I think we got to put some kind of like reference to Nuclear Man in the fortress.
Oh my God, can you imagine? Because there's little references to Batman continuity, both like not just in the comics but in the movies as well. There's a couple of references there's like some references from the Donner movies and references from the Nolan movies. My kind of feeling is that,
I'm shamelessly drawing the Burton bat plane into it.
Oh yeah, and
Anton First is a genius, and his bat plane needs to be back into something.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about it is you get to kind of draw from all your own. Everyone comes to this with their own personal experience of the Batman and the Superman comics and movies and TV shows and things that we grew up on. And to me, it's not. I don't consider there to be like any walls between those different media. Like it's all good stuff. And if like I think in issue 1 there's a couple of references to like the Nolan films, and later on there's some references to the Donner movies, and again the way that Darick's designing various aspects of it. I think it's like there's the Burton Batwing, and yeah, we've been having a lot of fun with it.
Awesome.
So one question I always had when it comes to co-creating and working together on a project, right? I know that DC as a whole is still a company, and I'm sure there's deadlines that has to be met for DC's purposes. But since this is kind of like Gary's story in a way, do you guys have more leniency because it's not inside the universe, where it's like its own series? Do you still have deadlines you have to meet when you co-work together? Like, do you have to get a
Oh
book
yeah.
back to Gary?
Well,
And
that's just publishing. I mean, it really comes back down to like, meeting a publishing deadline. Once they solicit a book, I had a lot of lead time on this, but I had enough happening on the lead time that I kind of ate it up, not getting as far ahead as I wanted to. But once they solicit a book, then you're kind of beholden to that deadline for the release, because if you don't make those dates, it affects retailers and sets off a domino effect that can hurt a lot of people that are counting on having your book on the stands at that time, because it's pre-sold, and then also they're hyping it and things like that. So, deadlines are they're more for the publishing aspect than it is the creative aspect. Gary's written so far ahead that I have a very clear idea where the story's going, and we've already hashed out a lot of it. He's like I said, he's writing issue 8, I'm finishing issue 4. So
Right. So the scripts were like 5, 6, and 7 are just sitting there, and yeah, I mean, the deadlines are obviously inviolable, and it's all reverse engineered from the fact that once issue 1 goes on sale May 24th, people that like the book are going to be in a comic store on June 24th expecting issue 2, and it had better be there. And the only way it's there is if I hit my deadlines and Darick hits his, and the letterer and the colorist, everyone has to. And it's a long process. I'll write an initial draft. Darick and Ben will both give me notes. I'll incorporate those notes. Then Darick will do pencils. We'll look at pencils. Then he'll do inks. We'll look at inks. And then we'll see colors. And then we'll see letters. And then generally when we see lettering, we do kind of a final pass, like just last minute tweaks. And then then at that point we do have a finished book. But it's there's multiple inside each book's deadline is the multiple kind of deadlines nested within that, in order to make sure that everyone has enough time to do what they need to do.
Awesome. Yeah, my goal is always to try to stay one step ahead of the letterer and the colorist. Mostly the colorist Diego Rodriguez, who I work very closely with and have for years. He also colored Oliver. So and the letterer is also Oliver's letterer. So we have the whole Oliver team on this Batman book.
That's right.
But with Diego, it's like I'm always trying to make sure that I don't put him in too much of a pinch by not turning the work in with enough time for him to be having 3 or 4 pages that he can be working on. If I'm behind on inks, then he's at least got something to color while I'm finishing up the inks. I don't like to work this way, but it seems to be endemic. You can't control everything.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes you get sick. Sometimes stuff happens.
That's what I was going to ask. Who you had coloring, doing the colors for this.
Yeah, Diego's amazing. It's actually my favorite part of the process. I love to look at Darick's pencils, and I love to look at his inks. But I imagine even Darick, who's not a colorist with a degree, it's when you see colors, it feels like the page really comes to life.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's done as beautifully as someone like Diego. It's so much of it is, especially with something like Batman, which always ends up being, there's a lot of shadow and darkness, and you go to some really interesting places. Again, not to spoil it, but there's some stuff later on in the book that really is dependent almost entirely on how it's going to be colored. And lit, and so to have someone like Diego working on it, gives you even when I'm like drawing a page, I'm like, can we do this? Like, this is gonna need some like crackerjack coloring to make this work. I'm like, well, Diego's doing it, so I know we're gonna be okay, and we can go to those places.
Yeah, did DC give you any flexibility on the colors? I know they DC, Marvel, they all have really strict policies when it comes to the colors of their characters. So was that
because we're kind of in our own continuity? It's like this is they've been pretty lax with me. I'm just kind of drawing traditional people too. It's like I don't really, when it comes to the DCU, unless I have to or want to or need to, like there's not really a need to reinvent the wheel here. Like we can kind of just do straightforward Batman, and they're pretty. This has actually been one of the easiest editorially, one of the easiest jobs I've ever had for DC, because Ben Abernathy and I go all the way back to the first issues of The Boys. So he and I, he was my original editor on The Boys at Wildstorm, and that's how we met years ago. So when we work together, it's like we know each other and we're friends. And so it goes really, right now, everybody in this group that's working together, including Diego. We've all experienced working together, and we all kind of know what the job is and how to do it. And like, unless there's something that's a red flag, or that we go too far off the rails for some reason, it's a pretty straightforward process. The only the thing that I really love too about working with Diego Rodriguez is that because he and I have a good, like, I've never met him in person, but I feel like if we ever do, we're gonna like be immediate friends, but he's a person that, like, I collaborate on the colors with him very closely, where he shows me stuff and asks me questions before he turns stuff in, and I send him reference material, like, oh, I kind of see it like this, and I'll find photographs that have that lighting, and he'll bring that lighting into it, and and that's what makes it really come together. So it's like I'm working hand in hand with the colorist to bring a full excuse me, the full art into focus. And it's not like he goes off and works in his own camp and then I see what it is on the page, like it used to be at Marvel back in the 90s. Like I wouldn't know what to expect until it was published. This is much better. I like that. I'm kind of a control freak in that I like to have eyes on everything as it goes forward, so we can catch mistakes or continuity errors, or, oh, that was supposed to be flame in the background and you did it like ice, and so sometimes
I didn't really have like a lot of specific. I didn't have like a tremendous desire to kind of reinvent anything like aesthetically. Again, a lot of this stuff is so kind of iconographic, the Batcave and the suit, and we all know what Superman looks like. And in terms of like color, I mean, it's not like I was saying to Ben, like, hey, do the Green Lanterns have to be green? Because I've got some other ideas. Like, it's all there's certain things that you just know they are the way that they are. Like every now and again, I didn't, for example, like the Joker's in the book, I didn't know what the Joker in this book was going to look like until Darick drew it. I was just like happy for him to do it. You remember Darick, I had a specific, like, I wanted the Penguin to look a certain way because I didn't want him to be like the flamboyant, top hat and tuxedo Penguin. For me, the version of the Penguin in this book is kind of a little closer to kind of the Colin Farrell, kind of the grounded Matt Reeves version. Every now and again, I'll have a specific idea for, I really want this to look this way. Like, and again, like the Fortress, because it's so central to the story, there was a specific look that I wanted for that. And I spoke to Darick at length about that. But for the most part, for me, it wasn't about like reinventing the way these characters, there's a lot of reinvention going on in the book in terms of who they are and their backstories and, kind of the whole, kind of the narrative aspect of it. But, aside from like a couple of really specific things I either did or didn't want to see, because I felt like they've been done too much before, or just that particular aesthetic didn't appeal to me. Darick's really kind of taken the lead on like deciding what this particular Batcave looks like, or this particular Batmobile looks like. I'm like, oh, it's got to be a muscle car, or it's got to be, a hot rod. Like that to me is not really story specific, so it doesn't matter unless there's a story reason why the Batmobile looks the way it does. It doesn't really matter to me as long as it looks cool.
Nice. I did get to create a Batmobile for this, so it's
there you go.
Yeah, it's like it's very cool. It's like an exotic sports car.
Yeah, I just took a Maserati and batted it out.
Yeah.
I think it was a Maserati. That might have been a Lamborghini.
Nice. Well, there you go. There goes the flexibility.
But Bruce can afford whatever, so
right.
I just want to know who the guy he pays real well to keep his mouth shut when he tricks it out for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Is there anything as we're going through this, as you're going through this entire series, and Gary, this is maybe more specific to you, as you've done plenty of movies and stuff like that. As you say, you by doing comics, like how much of it was this like was this a stretch goal for you as you're working on this, or is this something that you're like, oh, okay, I'll take my shot at it, sort of thing, or
I don't know. I mean, obviously the idea, when they say, would you like to write a Batman book, of course you immediately say yeah, because I been reading those comics and grew up watching the Adam West TV show and the Tim Burton movies and and playing the video, the Arkham video games, and just I'm actually more of a Superman. I like Batman a lot. I like Superman a little bit better, which is why when they said like pitch us a book, I was like, oh, can I pitch a Superman book? And they're like, well, we kind of want Batman because 2022 is kind of the year of Batman with the Matt Reeves movie and everything. I said, okay, I'll come up with a Batman story for you, but I kind of want to have Superman in there somewhere. And so the Fortress of Solitude idea, kind of suggested itself. But no, I mean, like, I don't really see myself as primarily any one thing or the other now. Like, I've actually spent more time. I'm always working on movies and television. But those are always also the hardest things to kind of get realized. I write books, I write comic books, I do podcasts, I do all kinds of, when I worked in the Star Wars universe, I started on Rogue One, but I ended up working on Star Wars Rebels for 2 seasons. I did the Last Jedi comic book for Lucasfilm and Marvel, and I wrote for 2 Star Wars short story collections as well. So you do a lot. Storytelling is in whatever form. In whatever form you can come at it. And I like being able to experiment with different forms, and comics has been a really, really interesting one for me, again, especially as someone who grew up reading comics in the same way that, Star Wars was, when that opportunity came up, I was like, why really I get to play with these characters? Like, that's so cool that, you kind of feel the same thing about working with the DC toy box.
Awesome.
That never gets old for me either. It's like,
why would it?
It's like, that's the best part for me. It's like my whole life, like even when I was a little kid, and I love that Gary uses the same analogy as I do, in that, because I have a feeling if Gary and I were little kids, back in the 70s together, like we would have been, brought all of our Star Wars figures into a big pile and gone out, rode our bikes down to the park and like played in the sand and made up stories. That's like, but since we're adults, we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
And getting paid.
Yeah.
and that's the big difference, is getting paid, but also having to kind of think about it a lot more. When I was bashing those action figures together, if I had like a plot problem, I didn't care. Now I have to care about that. There's like a logic issue. I actually have to think about it a lot more deeply. But it's actually something I've thought about a lot over the years. I think, especially coming from the Star Wars universe, we talk about all the different ways that storytelling is a big part of the Star Wars. Obviously the films are great, and the TV shows tell great stories, and the comics and the books and the video games are always with Star Wars, right? There's got to be a story because that's where it began.
Nice.
But I often think of the people don't think about this very often, but I really do think about the toys as a great catalyst for storytelling as well. They're the stories that you tell yourself, right? When you've got your whatever, it's funny. It's almost like improv. It's like, well, these are the action figures that I have, right? I can't afford everyone in the store. I've got a Rancor keeper. I've got Luke Skywalker. I've got, Princess Leia over here, and I've got a Darth Vader figure. Like these are the things that are available to me. I need to come up with a story that incorporates all these characters. And so like, that's, I think, like how I first got interested in storytelling, was just playing with the toys and, just in your kind of childlike imagination, always trying to come up with like, what's the backstory, like why is the Rancor keeper and some guy from Cloud City like bashing into each other and fighting? Well, you've got to come up with some reason for that. What's the story? And I think a lot of kids, you kind of, start to, kind of flex and develop their storytelling muscles. I think playing with toys like that, imaginative play, is a really good place to start as a storyteller. It's where a lot of us just naturally do tend to start.
I remember my dilemma as a kid was trying to figure out why there was only one stormtrooper.
I used to hate those commercials they had where like the kids got 50 stormtroopers.
Yeah, like how
does he have 50 stormtroopers? When I went to the store every week with my allowance, my pocket money, and I'm like, well, I've already got one stormtrooper. I could either buy another one, or I could buy I want to buy a different character.
Right.
Like how much, like how rich is your dad that you can afford to buy 50 stormtroopers? They look very good in a commercial.
Yeah,
I didn't know any kid at school
when
that
your
had
dad
50
is Kenner
stormtroopers.
Toys, I guess.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always liked how they had the perfect backyards to play with that shit in too. Like
I know,
set up
it
on the
was
perfect
looked
mountain.
so good, yeah.
Like I wanted that
very,
kid.
very envious. I had one stormtrooper that got shot over and over and over, basically. Poor guy. every single stormtrooper that got shot in my little backyard was the same dude.
No, I was that kid where my dad, I was lucky. Kitty City was going out of business at the time, unfortunately. But my dad went in there and he bought every single Star Wars toy that was on discount. And I probably had maybe about 40 stormtroopers.
There you go.
Fair.
And my story was they arrested my Lego toys. They arrested my Lego toys and put them in the G.I. Joe jail. I don't know if you remember that, but
there you go.
That was my plot line when I was a kid. So one thing I want to ask both of you as well before we get towards the end of the interview is that, so for one book alone, let's just say, for example, issue 1, since that's out, how long of a process is it just to get one book from inception to completion?
Do you remember when we first pitched this, Darick? It was like February.
It was
It was a while ago,
year.
right?
Yeah, February of 2021.
2021.
Yeah, and
then we were ready to
so
roll by the
so a
summertime,
little over a year later, we're actually on
issue 1 and 2 took
shelves.
me a ridiculous amount of time because I actually used to, for 17 years, I worked in a basement studio in my house, and in August of last year, I got this outside space. So this is now just dedicated to my workspace.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I was warning you. It's not COVID, folks. You won't catch it through the screen. It's just a chest cold, but it doesn't want to let me talk. No, it was so the move took you. If you can imagine unentrenching yourself from a space that you've been in for 17 years, like that was it wasn't a small move. It was a major thing to get me out of my studio and set up over here, and I lost some time doing that. So while I had some lead time on the book, I ate it up in the move. And then, like I said, life doesn't leave you alone if you get sick or anything else. And then number 2 was an incredibly dense story. Like there was a lot of characters, a lot of stuff to draw. And like, I was surprised, like no matter how hard I tried, I could not draw that issue quickly, but it looks good. I think it's
because it's just like one massive action scene. Yeah.
It's a massive action scene with like it's almost like the old cartoon of like the writer and the artist on the stage at Comic-Con. He's like, oh, well, the writer's saying, I can ask for anything. I got an unlimited budget, and if I want 1 million guys attacking another guy's, I can ask for that. And then the artist's just like, I'll kill you.
I always feel the need to apologize. Like if I'm writing a novel and I write 50,000 Spartan warriors come over the hill, that's fine. I can just write it on a page and it's done. But if I'm doing that as a comic,
yeah,
if it's necessary for the story, then we're going to do it. But I'll often put a note into the artist like, Darick, I'm so sorry, 50,000 Spartan warriors coming over the hill.
But it's
figure out a way
like,
to do this.
I often like to say to people, and since, like I said, I work a little bit as a writer myself from time to time, I know the difference. And even writing for myself, knowing I'll be drawing it later, I'll be angry at myself as the artist. Go, what was I thinking? But but it's also the idea that if you write the word telephone and draw a telephone, guess which person gets done first?
I saw that's the thing, right? How long did it take me to say or to write down panel 1, 50,000 Spartan warriors come over the hillside?
25 seconds.
What was that? 6 seconds? How long is it going to take Darick to draw it though? Considerably longer. I saw an artist the other day on Twitter complaining about horses, saying like, writers, can we please don't give me horses anymore? I'm sick of them. Like some things are very tricky for like whether it be a horse or some writers really don't like drawing like hands, like close-ups on hands and things like that. There are again things that as writers you don't think about, right? Because like what's spectacular about a horse? But they're actually an artist will tell you they're fucking hard to draw. And, and these are things that you learn as the more time you spend in comics.
Yeah, I know it sounds really good, and then when you're actually doing it, and I won't even see it because I get into the script and I'm just imagining it as I read it, and it's so I'm enjoying what Gary's written, so I don't even really put my head into like how much work it's going to take to draw it until I'm actually in the thick of it. And the weirdest things will hold you up, like the things that I think are going to go bam, like why am I still drawing this panel? Like this should be an easy panel. And then the things I think like this is going to take me forever, I'll get through because I spent so much time worrying and thinking about it that it's practically drawn by the time I take my pencil to the page. Like I know what I'm going to do with it because I've obsessed, like this is going to be a really hard panel. So it's very strange, but it's like, it's the casual stuff that's the hardest. Like the stuff that I'm still wrapping up for this issue is mostly one of the pages, mostly like Bruce casually in the Batcave, but Bruce has to look like a human. And it's almost easier to draw like the Batman stuff where he's in action and in the costume because it almost lends itself to natural layouts. But when a person is doing something naturally and it looks wrong, that's going to jump out to the reader more than Batman doing something dynamic that might look a little weird, because you're already at the starting point of weird when you're looking at Batman jumping off a building, because that just is not something you'll see in real life. You're never going to be in a position where you're going to be walking down the street and go, oh, there goes Batman, or here comes Batman right into my face. But if Bruce is just sitting in a chair and working on his computer and he looks off, you're going to go, that looks weird, and you might not even know why. But if I draw it wrong, you're going to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's often a very thankless task in that regard, and it does remind me a lot of kind of movie work. Again, it's very easy for me to write a space battle or whatever, but then to turn that into a film is with all those visual effects and cinematography, that's obviously very, very difficult. And then in the middle of it, at least people go, oh wow, look at those amazing visual effects, and what those artists did is like very visible and is often appreciated. If you do great visual effects in a movie, people will call them out. But to Darick's point, yeah, like it's not necessarily again, a layman I think might assume this to be the case, but it really isn't any easier to draw Batman drinking a cup of tea than it is, him fighting, the Joker, right? You think, well, the big kind of action scene would be trickier, right? But like to Darick's point, just capturing little human moments like Bruce drinking a cup of tea and but having it look right. But again, people will just skim by. Yep, that's what drinking a cup of tea looks like, but they don't realize that there's like 100 ways to make that look bad, and Darick has to find the right one.
And thank you for that. But the thing of that is that if you do it right, that means if you did skim right by it, that means I did my job perfectly. Like I don't want you to be hung up on like looking at Bruce drinking a cup of tea unless that tea has poison in it, because that's a big deal. Then you really need to be focused on Bruce drinking that tea. But if he's just having a conversation with Alfred and it's going into the next moment, you should skim by it. But it's funny to me too, like that, I'll spend 4 hours on that, inking that Bruce with
one scene, right? Yeah.
And people are going to be like, oh, they're just reading on. But that's, that's the magic of comics too. Like you want to create, if you do your job right, you've created a world that is so immersive that you are kind of tricked into believing you're in that world for that minute of time. And if I've done that, and and if you leave the book feeling like, oh, I've been somewhere and I experienced something, and you're feeling anything from it, well then that's, I certainly have plenty of comic books from my childhood which wouldn't make you feel that way. When I couldn't draw an arm correctly and it just looked like a lump of dough.
I used to remember when somebody told me that about Rob Liefeld, he doesn't like drawing feet. You go back looking at his comic, you notice you'll find a way to have the feet out, like they're always obscured or out of the panel. It's like, oh, once you know what to look for, you go, oh yeah, he really doesn't like drawing feet, so you'll just never see them.
I cut you off at the ankles.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah, there's all kinds of little tricks that you can do too when like deadlines are pressing. You go, well, do I really need that in the background, or can that be a silhouette?
Right.
Awesome. All right.
Sometimes you can take that and use that to your advantage too. Like sometimes thinking that way will make a scene more dramatic and interesting in a way you hadn't originally conceived it, because you are minimalizing it. I learned that from Frank Miller. Like you look at Frank Miller's work, when he goes minimalist, sometimes it's more potent and powerful without all the bells and whistles when you're focusing on just this hard iconic shape. I'm over talking.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I was going to say, before we get Gary out of here, quick question to both of you. What would Batman's favorite food be?
Well, I know from the Lego Batman movie that it's lobster thermidor, isn't it? He loves lobster thermidor. That's the Lego version of Bruce Wayne, though.
The Lego version
makes sense.
Like all this work that you from this universe, your perspective, what would you think Batman would like to eat?
It's funny. It's funny. It actually reminds me of something that in the first draft of one of the issues that I did, Bruce is pulling an all-nighter in the Batcave. And like one of the classic kind of images that you would have to kind of illustrate that is like there's Chinese takeout boxes all over the place. But I'm like, oh no, wait, like the whole world's been shut down. There is no Chinese takeout. Like nothing's getting delivered. And so you have to. There's just little things you have to think about. Like, but again, this is my point. Even though you don't, I get like I've never spent a lot of time thinking about it because it's never been like story relevant. But like, I guarantee you, Bruce Wayne's not like, oh, I'm too obsessed with the death of my parents to think about like what I like to eat. He has a favorite food. Right. It's never, and I think sometimes when you take a moment to like indicate that, like, you know, Alfred's made his favorite sandwich or whatever. Maybe it's like a ham and cheese sandwich. Let's say Bruce, look, okay, we've done it. Batman's favorite food is ham and cheese, a really good like
Well,
grilled ham and cheese sandwich, the way Alfred makes it for him.
Right. I would
Why
think it would be
not?
something that would tie into comfort food for him. Like I think
Yeah.
Batman's favorite food would be like something simple like a grilled ham and cheese sandwich, but it has to be just so because maybe it's something that's a happy, like all of us, like it's a happy memory, or that the taste or the experience of eating and smelling that food brings you back to a more
Plus,
happy
you know,
time.
lots of
Because I
protein,
think most of the
carb
time
up
he
before you
just-
go out on patrol.
I think, he just drinks those weird ass.
I like the idea that when
shakes
he's-
and scarfs down, you know, meat.
I like
and
the
then
idea
there's
that when he's
off.
Bruce Wayne, you know, and he has to keep up appearances, he's eating a lot of, you know,
Fancy
caviar
restaurants.
and like a lot of kind of, but yeah, but but again, I'm just kind of making it up as I go, but I feel like he probably hates all that stuff. He eats it because like that's what
He
Bruce
has to.
Wayne would eat, but like
Yeah.
when he's down in the Batcave and he eats what he wants, he's probably eating, you know, hot pockets or whatever, just whatever he wants.
I always thought that he would like, he might, you know, because he had to train all over the world, that he'd have a penchant for some like weird ass food that you could only get on the outskirts of the Himalayas. Or
Like, yeah, like
that.
something when he was like training
something
out
that
in the
like
Far
nobody
East or
else has
whatever.
even tasted. Yeah, because something that
He wants
nobody else
that-
has even tasted because
He wants
he's
that
been all over
Szechuan
the
sauce.
world.
Yeah, he's never
Yeah.
been able to get it again.
Like him and Rick.
It might be, whatever it might be. But again, that to me is like the classic version, and it's a valid version, right? And I know we're on a very specific point here, but it's a good question to like. Sometimes asking questions like this is a good way to kind of like think about a character, just something as silly as what do they like to eat. And again, the obsessive workaholic version of Bruce Wayne would just say, I don't care, just heat something up, like just something to eat. I don't really care what it is.
Right.
But and that's valid, but I still kind of feel like when he's got a minute, like he does, I guarantee you he's got favorite music. He does have favorite food.
He's got to have
It's-
favorite music.
Yeah, why? Because those are the things that make you human. No one's that dull that they don't like things, right?
Yeah.
No matter how fucked up they are, they all still like things. Hitler likes dogs.
Yeah, my thought was
It's
like-
we all have things that humanize us, right? Even though we may be deeply troubled individuals.
Yeah.
One of my favorite figures that they put out at DC Direct is this
look at that.
Kevin McGuire, John's Martian Manhunter with an Oreo. So in John's case,
go.
he had an obsession with Oreos, and they worked it into the action figure.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I
There you
love
go.
that. I love that kind of attention to detail because again, it was really funny in Justice League, which I was a huge fan of before I got to work on it.
Mhm.
That John was obsessed with Oreos.
Not to give too much away. I think it's something that happens in issue 4, but we do have one character who joins the team to help Batman break into the fortress. And I won't go into details because you'll need to read it.
Right.
But he's entirely motivated by pizza. That's the only reason
That's right.
he's doing it.
Okay.
And
Now
like, so
we-
just things like that can be like fun, you know, just fun
My
ways to kind of get
favorite
comedy into
character
the
to draw
story.
right now.
That's
I'm
right. Yeah.
absolutely obsessed with drawing this guy. I can't wait to
Yeah,
get
we
the
think
issue
he's going to be they're going to be the breakout character of the
or
issue
piss
run.
everybody off. I don't care though.
Arlo,
because
Cole,
I'm
you
not
gotta-
gonna
So
draw
we
it.
got
ask
to
the question.
create.
Now,
We
yeah.
got to create one new superhero. Everyone else in the book is someone that you know from DC canon, right? Some better known than others. Some are like, really, that you have to go like really digging. But we dug up some obscure characters, but we did create one entirely new one that will, I guess, now become canonized by DC. And my suspicion, my hope is that they will end up being kind of the breakout character, because Darick loves drawing at them. I love writing them. They're really a lot of fun.
And
Awesome.
I'm hoping we get to go back and do some more with that character.
Yeah, we got to do the
Fingers
spin-off.
crossed.
Yeah.
Totally different thing.
Nice.
So, quick question then, right? So this character you mentioned likes pizza. Would this character eat pizza, or would they eat pizza with pineapples?
You know, my whole thing is don't yuck other people's yums. If you like pizza, if you like pineapple on your pizza, that's
Yeah,
your business. I don't.
your
As long as
pizza.
you're not making me eat it, I don't care. I see all this
Exactly.
people wasting their time on the internet arguing about like what's the best way to make a grilled cheese, or what's the best flavor of this or that. Like the best flavor is the one you like.
Right,
Just
exactly.
enjoy what you want and mind your own business and leave other people alone. People in the age of the internet, people desperately need things to argue about. Oh, but boneless or bone-in chicken wings. Who fucking cares? Eat the ones that you like. Mind your own business and let people eat the ones that they want to eat.
Right, like more for me. That's the way I always treat it. Or
There
more
we
for
go.
you. Hey,
I
you
get
like
why it's
that?
divisive. I get like why pineapple on a pizza is divisive, right? Because it seems wrong to a lot of people. I discovered yesterday, my kids
It's
found
not
this out.
Italian.
Hawaiian pizza was actually invented by Canadians, so you've actually got them to blame.
There you
It's
go.
got Canadian name.
I found that out.
But
this
also,
week,
it's
yeah.
like, but you don't hear the same like objections like when Pizza Hut is like injecting everything under God's green earth into the crust, or
That's
Domino's is making, here's the chocolate chip cookie pizza. Like,
Right.
Nobody goes, hey,
That
that's
sounds
not
good,
pizza.
actually. Yeah.
Little
It's a
Caesars
fact.
once had a glow in the dark pizza.
Oh,
I-
you know what? I saw
I drank too much and had a glow in the dark reaction.
the Domino's Pepsi pepperoni pizza, or is it pizza at Pep? Somebody has a Pepsi pepperoni pizza, and it's made out of Pepsi. They're pepperoni. I'm like, okay,
No,
that's
no
new.
thanks.
That was always one of
More-
my favorite.
more for
stand-up
you.
bits. The late Mitch Hedberg, who's my favorite
was so
stand-up
great.
comedian. He's long gone now, but he was hilarious.
Mitch
He used to do
Hedberg.
a bit about how he was taking like a long overnight bus journey once on like a Greyhound bus. He's like traveling across the country or whatever, and
Yeah.
all he had with him to eat was like some crackers and some like cheese whiz, the cheese that squirts out of a
Cheese whiz,
can.
yeah.
And it was dark in the bus because it was nighttime and there were no lights on in the bus, and so he couldn't see like where the cheese was going. He was like, I wish this cheese was luminous. They should make this luminous so that I can see it out of the can. And he was like, because listen, if you're eating a room temperature cheese that comes out of a can, you probably don't give a shit if it glows in the dark as well.
No, that's true.
I always like Mitch Hedberg had a great take on it. He goes, yeah, how did the DoubleTree, how did they get that name? People sitting around a conference table, it's like one tree, no, DoubleTree, hell yeah.
So that's the
I
right
was
number
hoping
of
for
trees.
triple tree.
Triple G.
I was hoping for triple tree.
Awesome.
We could just do a whole podcast where we just
Oh,
do Mitch
yeah,
Hedberg
just
bits.
There you go.
if you don't know who we're talking about, go to YouTube.
Oh my God,
He's
so
for
good.
Go to
sure-
YouTube, folks.
He lives forever. Mitch
So
Hedberg,
good.
he was
Yeah.
a genius.
Classic jokes. Very classic. Before we get out of here, do you guys want to plug anything? Gary, Darick, plug all your stuff. Where can people find you? What's coming out next? Not episode 2, but
My
issue 2
my
is
list
coming out in June.
my list is really short, so I'll go first. You can find me on Twitter at Darick R. And unless you hate my side of politics, you'll enjoy my Twitter feed. And you can find information about my backstory or original art, things like that, at DarickRobertson.com. And the main thing I'm going to plug is The Boys Season 3, baby. Lands this Friday on Amazon
Oh my God, so
Prime.
you can't miss it. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I know, I'm so excited.
I'm
Nice.
excited. I'm excited. Yeah.
I'm like, they got Soldier Boy with Jensen Ackles, who's a hell of a nice guy. And I'm very excited for season 3 to land, and mostly because I'm going to be surprised along with everybody else this season. I decided not to read too far ahead into the screenplays, so I know a little bit of what's going to happen, but a whole lot I don't know is going to happen. I haven't seen anything because I couldn't go up to Toronto to be on set for season 3 like I did with 1 and 2. Season 3 lands on Amazon Prime this Friday.
Awesome.
Nice.
Gary.
Easy to find me on social media. It's just my name spelled out on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. GaryWhitta. So Twitter /Gary Whitta, Twitch.tv/Gary Whitta. And I do stream often on Twitch. I actually have a major project coming up on Twitch. I think maybe starting as soon as next month. I have a sci-fi novel coming out later this year, and I wrote and produced my own audio kind of narrative drama adaptation of it. So almost like an old-fashioned radio drama, but we're going to be doing it as a monthly or a weekly podcast and a live presentation every week on Twitch over the course of 9 episodes. So
Nice.
there's going to be some announcements coming up about that very soon. We're going to show a trailer. We're going to reveal the title of it. We're going to do episode 1. That's all coming up soon. And if you're at all interested in that, and I hope you will be, follow me on Twitter, GaryWhitta, and again, that's the same on YouTube and on Twitch.
Okay. Nice.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening later. And Gary and Darick, appreciate your time. And thanks for stopping by and talking to us.
All right. Thank
So
you.
a good time as
People.
usual.
Go pick up that book.
Book 1,
pick up the
Batman
book.
Fortress.
Batman
Batman
Fortress
Fortress
in stores
is
now.
out.
There are 2 variant
In stores
covers.
now.
Collect them all. And we're doing variant
variant-
covers across
yeah,
the
2
rest of the run
variants.
as well, I believe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, real quick. Are any of you guys going to San Diego Comic-Con? Any Comic-Cons coming up?
I don't have any immediate plans. I don't know. I'm trying to keep my schedule pretty light. I was supposed to be in Ontario with Gary this last weekend down for Comic-Con Revolution, but for obvious reasons, I was not able to go. So, but I'm Long Beach Comic-Con, I think in September, I'm supposed to be there for the Hero Initiative. So if you miss me in Ontario, it's a good chance you'll get to see me in Long Beach.
There you go.
But that's in September. But Comic-Con San Diego, I'm not sure. They make it harder and harder to get in. So somebody has to kind of arrange it for me at this point, and I haven't heard anything. So
okay, awesome. Thank you.